I used to believe my family cared about me. I really did, up until that night. It started like any other evening. I was making dinner, stirring a pot of pasta, the aroma of garlic filling my tiny apartment. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from my Uncle Michael. Weird. He rarely texted me. Curious. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it. It was a video. At first, I thought it was some old family clip, maybe something funny he wanted to share. But as soon as I hit play, I heard my father's voice. Ethan should be grateful. He'd be nothing without us. I froze. The video was shaky, like someone had accidentally left their phone recording. But the voices? Crystal clear. A pathetic failure, my mom, Linda, added with a dry laugh. At least he's good for something paying our bills. Laughter. My chest tightened. If Ethan ever stops sending money, my uncle's voice chimed in, we'll just guilt him into it. He's too soft to say no. I gripped my phone. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. They weren't talking about some random loser. They weren't joking. They were talking about me. I had spent years supporting them, covering rent, paying off debts, sending money every time they claimed they were in a crisis. I had convinced myself they loved me for it, that they appreciated me. But this was the truth. I sat there, staring at my screen, my entire world cracking apart. Then just like that, the message disappeared. This message has been unsent. Uncle Michael must have realized his mistake, panicked, deleted it, hoping I hadn't seen it. But I had, and for the first time in my life, I saw everything clearly. I could have called him. I could have confronted them all. But what would they say? They'd lie, make excuses, twist things around until I felt guilty again. No, I wasn't going to react. Not yet. I had a plan. The next morning felt different. The sun still crept through my blinds. The smell of fresh coffee still filled my tiny apartment. But there was something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Awareness. For years, I had been running on autopilot, answering their calls, sending them money, making sure their lives stayed comfortable at the cost of my own. But now, every little detail of my morning routine felt like I was watching myself from the outside, seeing the truth for the first time. Then, like clockwork, my phone buzzed. Dad, morning, Ethan, just checking in. Hope you're doing well. I stared at the message. Too normal. My dad never texted just to check in. There was always a reason. And sure enough, Dad. Oh, by the way, rent is due soon. Can you send it by Friday? There it was. The same cycle, the same routine. But this time, I wasn't playing along. I hovered over the keyboard, my fingers instinctively typing out my usual response. Of course. Or, no problem. Maybe even an apology for taking too long. But I stopped, deleted it, and instead, I typed, me, I can't this month. Simple, direct, no explanation, no apology. Then I hit send. I placed my phone on the counter and took a slow sip of coffee, waiting. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Buzz. Dad, what do you mean you can't? I could almost hear the frustration through the screen. I had never said no before. Another message. Dad, Ethan, this is serious. We're counting on you. You know we don't have another option right now. Right. No other option except getting a job, managing their own money, making the same sacrifices I had been making for them for years. Buzz. Uncle Michael. Michael, hey kiddo. Your dad is freaking out. Is everything okay? I almost laughed. They weren't asking if I was okay, if I needed help, if I had been struggling. It was never about me. It never had been. I took a deep breath and typed, me, I have some unexpected expenses this month. I can't send anything. Sorry. That was it. No details, no room for argument. Then I waited. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. For years, I had been their lifeline. The moment I said no, panic. The 3 little dots appeared, then disappeared. Again and again. I imagined my dad pacing the room, my uncle coming up with excuses, my mom waiting to play the guilt card. Then, Dad, what could possibly be more important than your family? And there it was, the guilt trip, the same one they had been using on me for years. I didn't respond. Less than a minute later, Dad, you know Jessica can't cover rent on her own. If she gets kicked out, that's on you. Ah, the sibling card. Classic. Then, Dad, we raised you, Ethan. We took care of you when you had nothing. Is this how you repay us? I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around my coffee mug. When I had nothing, they never took care of me. I had put myself through school, worked 3 jobs just to escape that house. And the moment I had money, they latched onto me like leeches, draining me dry. Buzz. Uncle Michael again. Michael, Ethan, don't do this. We're family. Your dad is just upset. You know how he gets. Just send the rent, and everything will be fine. Fine for who? I set my phone down, my hands steady. For years, I'd been terrified of this moment, afraid that if I ever stopped paying, they'd hate me, cut me off. But now I knew the truth. They never loved me. They loved what I gave them. And the second I stopped handing out money, I became nothing to them. Buzz. Dad, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this is unacceptable. You're being selfish. This family needs you, and you're acting like some entitled brat. Grow up and do the right thing. The final mask slipping. No more fake sweetness. No more pretending to care. Just demands. My phone buzzed again, this time a voice message from Uncle Michael. My hands trembled as I stared at the play button. Something told me this one would change everything. I hesitated. The voice message from Uncle Michael sat on my screen like a loaded gun. He wasn't the type to send voice notes, he preferred texts. The kind that guilt-tripped with just enough fake concern to keep me in line. But this was different. Slowly, I pressed play. His voice came through, sharp and impatient. Ethan, listen, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny. Your dad is losing his mind. Your mom is a wreck, and honestly, I don't blame them. I swallowed hard, gripping my phone. You've always been, well, a little ungrateful, but this is beyond selfish. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to keep listening. You have a good job, don't you? You make more than any of us. You don't even need that money. Meanwhile, your family is struggling. And what? You just wake up one day and decide you don't care anymore? A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. Unbelievable. You owe them, Ethan. After everything they've done for you, all the sacrifices they made. They gave you life, and now you're just gonna walk away? Pretend they don't exist? What kind of son does that? I clenched my jaw, fingers tightening around my phone. Then his tone changed, darker. If you really want to be that kind of person, fine. But don't expect them to forgive you. Don't expect to come crawling back when you realize how much you need them. Because once you cross this line, there's no coming back. The message ended. Silence filled the room. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the replay button. I should have felt scared. I should have panicked. Should have been scrambling to fix this, to make things right, to apologize. But instead, I felt calm. More than that, I felt free because he had just confirmed everything. They didn't love me. They didn't respect me. They didn't even see me as a person. I was a wallet to them, a walking, breathing ATM. And the moment I stopped handing out money, I was nothing. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my dad. Dad, last chance, Ethan. Send the rent. I stared at the words for a long time. Then, without hesitation, I blocked him, blocked my mom, blocked my uncle. And just like that, for the first time in years, I was free. Or so I thought. Because the next morning, someone knocked on my door. The confrontation. It was early. Too early. The kind of early where normal people were still asleep. Where the streets were still quiet. Where the sun was just barely peeking over the horizon. For a second, I thought about ignoring it. Maybe it was a neighbor, a package delivery, anything other than what I knew it was. Then another knock. Louder this time, more insistent. I took a slow breath, steeling myself, and walked to the door. My fingers hesitated on the handle. Then I opened it. Jessica, my sister, stood there, arms crossed, eyes bloodshot like she hadn't slept. Her clothes were wrinkled, her expression somewhere between anger and desperation. Are you serious, Ethan? Her voice was sharp, like a blade pressed against my skin. What the hell is wrong with you? I blinked, keeping my tone neutral. Good morning to you too, she scoffed, running a hand through her already messy hair. Don't do that. Don't act like this isn't a big deal. You blocked everyone. Mom is freaking out. Dad's losing his mind. And you're just what? Cutting us off? Pretending we don't exist? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. I don't know, Jessica. Maybe I just got tired of being treated like a piggy bank. Her jaw clenched. Oh my God, not this again. I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, not this again. Let's talk about what this actually is then. I've been paying your rent for years. Covering your bills, your food, even your stupid gym membership. And the one time I say no, the one time I set a boundary, Dad calls me a selfish brat. Mom guilt trips me. And you, I gestured at her, show up at my door like I committed a crime. Jessica's lips parted, like she was about to argue, but no words came out, so I kept going. And don't even try to pretend you care about me. I saw the video. Her face went pale. For the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. What video? I smiled, but it wasn't a kind one. You know exactly what video. Jessica shifted on her feet, glancing away. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Look, that it wasn't serious, okay? We were just joking. You're being dramatic. My voice was quiet now, but sharp as glass. Joking, the first took a step closer. You all sat around laughing, calling me a pathetic failure, saying I should be grateful for the chance to pay your bills. Do you know what that feels like, Jessica? To hear your own family talk about you like that? She exhaled harshly, rubbing her face. Ethan, come on. No, I cut her off. You come on. You want money? Get a job. You want someone to take care of you? Find someone else, because I'm done. Silence. She just stood there, staring at me, and for a second I saw something flicker across her face. Something raw, but it was gone just as quickly. Then her expression hardened. Her mouth twisted into something ugly. Fine, she spat. You want to be a selfish bastard? Go ahead, but don't come crawling back when you realize you have no one left. And with that, she turned and walked away. I stood there, watching her go, my chest tight, but my spine straight. Because she was wrong. I did have someone left. I had myself. But just as I closed the door, letting out a shaky breath, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mom, calling me. Again. But I wasn't going to pick up. Not this time. I stared at my phone, watching it vibrate across the table. Mom, I already knew what she was going to say. The same guilt tripping, the same manipulations, the same we did everything for you, and this is how you repay us? Speech. I let it ring. And then, without hesitation, I blocked her too. For the first time in my life, I was completely cut off from them. No more late-night phone calls. No more last-minute emergencies that always required my money. No more feeling like I owed them something just because I existed. It should have felt freeing, and in a way it did. But the silence left behind was loud. For years, my life had been dictated by their needs, their problems, their expectations. Now, there was nothing. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, the weight of my decision finally settling in. But there was no regret, no second guessing. I had done the right thing. And then, my doorbell rang. The last attempt, I already knew who it was before I even got up. Jessica had already tried. Now, it was Dad's turn. I walked to the door, my footsteps slow, deliberate. When I opened it, there he was, Robert, standing in my doorway like he had every right to be here. He looked angry, but underneath that anger, I saw something else. Panic. He was losing control, and he knew it. Ethan, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. We really don't. His jaw tightened. Enough of this nonsense. You're acting like a child, blocking your own family, ignoring your mother. What the hell has gotten into you? I scoffed. You're really standing here, acting like I'm the one in the wrong? Dad took a slow breath, pinching the bridge of his nose like he was trying to compose himself. Look, I don't know what kind of ideas you've been filling your head with, but you're part of this family. That means something. It's not just about you. There it was. The same speech. The same, we're family, so you owe us logic. I had heard it 1,000 times before, but now I saw it for what it really was, manipulation disguised as obligation. I leaned against the doorframe. Let me ask you something, Dad. His eyes narrowed. When was the last time you asked me if I was okay? His brow furrowed. What? You heard me. I crossed my arms tighter. When was the last time you asked how I was doing? If I was struggling? If I needed help? Silence. I watched him shift uncomfortably. He had no answer, because we both knew the truth. They had never cared about my well-being, only my money. That's not the point, he finally said, his tone sharper now. This isn't just about feelings, Ethan. It's about responsibility. You're abandoning us. I laughed. A cold, bitter sound. Abandoning you? I shook my head. I've spent years supporting this family, paying for everything while you all sat back and did nothing. And the one time I say no, suddenly I'm abandoning you? That's not fair, he snapped. We've done plenty for you. Oh yeah? I tilted my head. Like what? His mouth opened, then closed, because he had nothing. Finally, his frustration boiled over. You know what? Fine, be selfish. Walk away, but don't expect us to be there when you come crawling back. I met his glare, completely unfazed. I'm not coming back. For a split second, I saw something flicker in his expression. Doubt. Like he had never actually considered that I would mean it, that I would choose myself over them. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off. I didn't watch him go. I just closed the door. No more strings attached. I let out a slow breath, pressing my back against the door. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. With finality, it was over. Truly, finally over. I walked back to my couch, grabbed my phone, and stared at it. For so long, it had been my leash, my tether to them, the thing that kept me shackled to their demands, their expectations, their control. Not anymore. I scrolled through my contacts, found the family group chat, and opened it. The last few messages were all from them. My dad's demands, my mom's guilt trips, my uncle's warnings, Jessica's anger. I took a deep breath, and then I typed, "Me, you all talk a lot about what you've done for me, but you've forgotten how much I've given up for you. Here's the reality. You never needed me. You just used me. I'm done. This is my last message. Don't ever contact me again." I hit send. The chat went silent. And for the first time in my life, so did my mind. There was no more guilt, no more fear, no more hesitation, just peace. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the weight of everything sink in. I had finally done it. I had finally chosen myself, and it felt damn good. The silence should have been unsettling. For years, my life had been filled with noise demands, guilt trips, endless calls asking for money. Now, with every number blocked, every message sent, every last connection severed, there was nothing. And yet, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of it. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter. The weight that had been pressing down on me for years, gone. No waking up to a flood of guilt-ridden texts. No anxiety over who needed money next. Just freedom. I made coffee, sat on my couch, stared out the window at the city below. It was peaceful. Until my doorbell rang. The last desperate attempt, I didn't rush to answer it. Didn't tense up or feel that familiar dread creeping in. I already knew who it was. When I finally opened the door, Jessica stood there again. But this time, something was different. The anger from before was gone. The frustration, the accusations, the entitlement, it had all drained from her face. She just looked tired. "Ethan." Her voice was quieter this time. I crossed my arms, waiting. "Can I come in?" I studied her for a long moment. Then I stepped aside. She walked in, hesitated in the middle of my living room, like she didn't know what to do with herself. "Mom and Dad are losing it," she finally said. I didn't respond. "They don't know what to do. They keep waiting for you to change your mind." She glanced at me, as if searching for something, some hint of weakness, some sign that I was regretting this. She wouldn't find one. "Are you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Are you gonna change your mind?" I let out a breath, slow and steady. "No." Jessica flinched, like she wasn't expecting me to say it so easily. "So that's it?" she asked. "You're just done?" I met her gaze. "Yeah." She let out a short, humorless laugh, ran a hand through her hair. "You know, I always thought you'd be the one person we could count on." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one person you could rely on to clean up everyone's mess?" She didn't argue, didn't even try to justify it. Instead, she just sank onto my couch, pressing the heels of her hands against her eyes. "I don't know what to do, Ethan." Something about the way she said it made me pause. For the first time, she didn't sound demanding. She sounded lost. And maybe, just maybe, I saw a little bit of myself in her. For years, I had felt trapped, convinced that I had to keep giving, that I had to keep sacrificing, that I had no choice but to be the person they expected me to be. But I had a choice, and so did she. I sat down across from her. "Then figure it out," I said simply. Jessica blinked up at me. "What?" "Figure it out," I repeated, "the way I had to. Get a job, pay your own bills. Stop expecting someone else to do it for you." She stared at me for a long time, and for the first time ever, she had nothing to say. Maybe because she knew I was right. Maybe because, deep down, she was scared of exactly what I had been scared of, that once the safety net was gone, she'd have to actually stand on her own. I didn't feel bad for her, but I did understand her. She let out a long breath, then slowly stood up. "I don't think Mom and Dad will ever forgive you for this." I met her gaze, completely unfazed. "That's fine. I don't think I'll ever forgive them either." She swallowed hard, nodding a little. Then, without another word, she walked to the door. Just before she left, she hesitated, looked back at me one last time. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise to change, but it was the closest thing to real she had ever been with me. "And that was enough," I nodded. "You too, Jess." Then she was gone, and for the first time in my life, I was truly free. A new beginning. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. No more family obligations. No more guilt. No more being their lifeline while they dragged me under. Just me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for anyone but myself, and it felt damn good. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and took a deep breath. I had spent so many years trying to keep them afloat, sacrificing everything, my money, my dreams, my peace of mind, just to make sure they never had to struggle. Now, it was my turn to actually live. I pulled up my email and started typing. Not to them, not to anyone who had taken me for granted, to a real estate agent, because it was time to leave this apartment behind, this city, this chapter of my life. I wasn't running, I was moving forward, and I wasn't looking back. Final thoughts. This wasn't the revenge they expected. They wanted me to crawl back, to beg for forgiveness, to realize I had made a mistake and fall right back into the role they had carved out for me. Instead, I disappeared from their world without a second thought. And that was the sweetest victory of all. Story 2. I lost my wife, Laura, just over a year ago. She was only 25. One day we were a family, her, me, and our 2 little kids, 18 months and 4 years old. And then, suddenly, we weren't. The weight of her absence pressed against me in ways I never could have imagined. It wasn't just grief, it was déjà vu. Because when I was a kid, I had lived through the same thing. My mom died when I was 5, leaving my dad to raise me alone. And now, here I was, standing in his old shoes, walking the same painful road. Losing my mom as a child wasn't just a single tragic event. It was an echo that stretched across my entire life. Grief became the background noise of my childhood, the silence at dinner, the missing hand on my shoulder, the holidays that felt incomplete. Dad tried, in his own way. He worked long hours, kept our home running, and did his best to shield me from how much he was struggling. But I felt it anyway, the loneliness, the way our house felt emptier, even though nothing had physically changed. I remember other kids talking about their mom's Mother's Day crafts, birthday surprises, and feeling like I existed in a different world, one where something essential had been stolen from me. That kind of loss does something to you. It wires your brain to fear happiness, because happiness can be taken away. I grew up either holding on too tight or pushing people away before they could leave me. And then I met Laura. She understood me in ways no one else ever had. Maybe because she had known loss, too. She was 6 when her dad died. The way she talked about him made me think of my mom, not just in the sadness, but in the way she tried to keep him alive in small ways. She carried him with her, in traditions and stories. And when we had kids, she was determined to give them what she had lost, a childhood full of love and warmth, without the looming shadow of absence. But life had other plans. It started with a cough, just a cold, we thought, but it wasn't. Within months, we were in a doctor's office, hearing words that didn't make sense. Words like aggressive and incurable. Words that meant I was about to watch the person I loved most slip away. Laura didn't waste time mourning herself. She used what little time she had left to build something lasting. She read bedtime stories like they were sacred. She recorded messages for the kids, made videos, left notes hidden in books and drawers. She wanted them to know her, even when she wasn't here. And then she was gone. Her funeral wasn't what people expected. She had planned it herself, no black clothing, no quiet weeping, bright colors, her favorite music playing in the background, and fireworks at the end. Because that was who she was, a burst of light, even in the darkest moments. But after the fireworks faded, I was alone. A single dad, drowning in grief while trying to be everything my kids needed. And I could feel my past creeping up on me, the fear that I would fail them the way I had felt failed. Then my father called. At first, it was just a check-in, which was unusual for him. My dad isn't the kind of guy who checks in, but I should have known there was more to it. A few conversations later, he got to the real reason for reaching out. "You should think about remarrying," he said one evening, his voice careful, like he knew I wouldn't take it well. I nearly dropped the phone. "What? You're young, Eric. The kids need a mother. And you need someone too." There it was. The thing I had been dreading. I wasn't stupid. I knew my dad's story. He had lost my mom, and within a year, he had married someone else. Ellen, my stepmom. I was only 6 when she moved in, and I hated it. Not because she was cruel. Ellen was actually nice, but she wasn't my mom. And every change she made in our home felt like she was erasing the woman who had been there before her. New furniture, new routines, new laughter that wasn't the same. I had rebelled in whatever ways a grieving 6-year-old could. I moved things back to their original places, refused to acknowledge Ellen as anything but a stranger in my house, and clung to my mom's memory, like it was the only thing keeping her from disappearing completely. Dad didn't understand, or maybe he didn't want to. "We can't live in a museum." He had snapped at me one night when I had moved the living room furniture back to the way Mom had left it. "You need to move on." on. Move on? I was 6. My whole world had crumbled, and he expected me to just adapt. And now, all these years later, he wanted me to do the same thing. Find a replacement, fill the void. But I wasn't my father. Dad, I'm not ready, I told him, gripping the phone tighter. And I don't think I ever will be. His sigh was heavy, like I was the one being unreasonable. You think I was ready when I married Ellen? I did what was best for you, for us. And I know it doesn't seem like it now, but one day, you'll see it was the right choice. I felt something break inside me. That's not the same thing, I said, my voice sharp. You weren't doing it for me. You were doing it because you didn't want to be alone. Silence. Then, finally, he said, I hope you don't make the same mistake I did. I laughed bitterly. Funny. I always thought your mistake was pretending Mom never existed after she was gone. I hung up before he could say another word. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to my kids breathe in their sleep. My father thought I needed to move on for their sake. That giving them a new mother was the only way to fix what was broken. But I knew better. Laura was gone, but her love wasn't. And my kids deserved to grow up, knowing that grief isn't something you erase. It's something you carry, and no matter what my father thought, I wasn't going to repeat his mistakes. My dad didn't take the hang up well. I should have expected it. He's never been the type to let things go easily. The text started the next morning, simple at first. I know this is hard. Then just think about it. Then you can't do this alone forever. By the end of the week, it had escalated to, your kids need a mother, Eric. Don't be selfish. That one made me see red. Selfish? I was up every night with nightmares that weren't mine, waking up to tiny hands shaking me, little voices asking, where's mommy? Trying to find words that wouldn't break them more than they already were. How the hell was I being selfish? I didn't respond, but I did think about it. Not about moving on, but about him, my dad. The way he handled things back when I was a kid. After Mom died, I remember how quickly the house changed. It wasn't a home anymore, it was a waiting room for something new. A year later, Ellen showed up, and suddenly, everything was different. She redecorated, took down the curtains my mom had picked out, replaced the furniture. It wasn't malicious, but it was fast. Too fast. Like my mom's presence was a stain that had to be scrubbed away. And my dad? He let it happen, encouraged it. You'll get used to it, he said when I refused to eat off the new plates she bought. I don't want to get used to it, I had snapped. I wanted my mom's plates, her laugh in the kitchen, her scent lingering in the air. I wanted things to feel normal, even if normal wasn't possible anymore. But instead of letting me grieve, he rushed to fill the space she left behind. And when I pushed back, he didn't comfort me. He got frustrated. One night, I was crying in my room, holding one of Mom's old sweaters that still smelled like her, and my dad walked in. You need to stop this, he said, his voice sharp. Stop what? I wiped my face with my sleeve, crying all the time. You're acting like you're the only one who lost her. I was 6 years old, sitting there with my whole world shattered, and my father, who was supposed to be my safe place, was telling me to stop crying. Then he said it. The words that burned into my brain and never left. I love Ellen more than I ever loved your mom. It was like being punched in the stomach. I don't remember what I said after that, or if I even said anything at all. Just that I stopped crying. Not because I wasn't sad anymore, but because I suddenly felt stupid for thinking my grief mattered. After that, I didn't let him see me cry again. I was a quiet kid before, but after that, I became a ghost in my own home. I kept my head down, stayed out of their way, and counted down the years until I could leave. And I did. I moved out as soon as I could. Built a life, fell in love with Laura, had kids, started fresh. But now, here I was, back in the same storm, just on the other side of it. And my father thought I'd handle it the way he did. The next time he called, I almost didn't answer. But something in me told me I needed to hear him out. Eric, he started, his voice cautious, like he knew I was still pissed. Listen, I didn't mean to upset you. You did. A long pause. I know. I waited for him to continue, but he didn't. So I said it for him. You think I should do what you did? He sighed. I think you should do what's best for your kids. I exhaled through my nose, gripping the phone tighter. And you think what's best is me finding some woman to slot into Laura's place? That's exactly what you're saying. Another silence, heavier this time. Eric, he said finally, his voice softer. I don't want you to be alone. I let out a humorless laugh. I've been alone, Dad. You made sure of that. What's that supposed to mean? I swallowed. My heart was hammering, but the words were already at the surface, demanding to be spoken. When Mom died, I lost you too. That's not true. It is, I shot back. You checked out. You let Ellen change everything. And when I wasn't okay with it, you made me feel like I was the problem. That's not fair. You told me you loved Ellen more than Mom. The words came out raw, like they'd been ripped straight from the wound. Do you even realize what that did to me? He didn't answer. I waited. For a defense, an excuse, something. But all I heard was his breathing, slow and uneven. Then, finally, a whisper. I was hurting too. I closed my eyes. I know that. Then why are we still here, Eric? Why can't we just move on? Because moving on doesn't mean erasing the past, I said. And I'm not gonna do that to my kids. I wasn't trying to erase her, he muttered. But you did, I said, my voice steady now. And whether you meant to or not, you made me feel like remembering her was wrong, like loving her was wrong. He inhaled sharply. That's not. I never meant to make you feel that way. But you did, I repeated. Silence stretched between us, thick with things we had never said before. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I just wanted a life again. I get that, I admitted. But I was 6. I didn't need a new family, I needed you. Another pause. Then, barely audible, I'm sorry. I opened my mouth to respond, but I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet, maybe not ever. But for the first time, I thought, maybe he actually understood, and maybe that was something. For now, it was enough. I have to go, I said, my voice softer than before. Okay. A beat of hesitation. Then Eric? Yeah, he stopped himself. Take care of yourself. And the kids, I exhaled. I will. I hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a kid fighting a war with his father. I felt like a dad who knew exactly what kind of father not to be. After that phone call with my dad, things didn't magically get better between us. There wasn't some dramatic reunion or a big emotional moment where everything fell into place. We just drifted into a quieter kind of understanding. The texts slowed down. The pressure to move on stopped. It was like he had finally heard me, really heard me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to fight to keep Laura's memory alive. But the grief? That didn't change. It had been a year, and I still caught myself reaching for my phone to text her. Still felt the emptiness in our bed like a phantom limb. Some nights, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the little things I wanted to tell her. The funny thing, our son said at breakfast, the way our daughter had learned to tie her shoes, the fact that I finally figured out how to make her favorite coffee just right. Grief wasn't something I could fix. It was something I had to carry, and my kids were carrying it too. One night, I found my 4-year-old son, Owen, curled up in Laura's old hoodie. It swallowed him completely, the sleeves trailing past his little hands. He wasn't crying, just holding on to it like a lifeline. I crouched beside him. Hey, bud, you okay? He nodded, but I could see the way his lip trembled. Do you miss Mommy? I asked gently. He nodded again. I sat down next to him, wrapping my arm around his tiny shoulders. Me too. He clung to the fabric tighter. I don't want to forget her. Something in my chest cracked open. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. You won't, but I don't remember everything, he whispered. Sometimes I try real hard, but it's like, he frowned, searching for the right words. It's like she's getting farther away. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. That's okay, I said. That's why we talk about her. That's why we tell stories and look at pictures. So even if some of the little details fade, you'll always remember how much she loved you. His little fingers clutched the hoodie tighter. Promise? I pressed a kiss to the top of his head. Promise. That was the difference between me and my dad. He had tried to make me forget, tried to force a new life on me before I was ready. And in doing that, he had made me feel like holding on to my mom was wrong. I wasn't going to do that to my kids. A few weeks later, my dad texted me. It was short, simple. Let's get lunch. I hesitated before responding, but in the end, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, the same one where our last conversation had nearly turned into an argument. But this time, the air between us wasn't charged with tension. It was cautious. I ordered a coffee. He ordered the same. For a few minutes, we just sat there, stirring our drinks in silence. Then, finally, he said, I've been thinking about what you said. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I screwed up. After your mom died, I thought moving forward meant leaving everything behind. I thought that was the only way to be happy again. I stayed quiet, letting him talk. I didn't see it at the time, but I was so desperate to make life feel normal again that I forgot. He trailed off, exhaling. I forgot it wasn't just my loss. It was yours too. I stared at him. In all these years, he had never admitted that, never even acknowledged it. He looked down at his cup. I regret that, Eric. For the first time, I didn't feel anger rising in my chest. just a deep, quiet sadness for the years we had lost. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he continued. I wanted you to know. I studied him, this man who had always seemed so sure of himself, so convinced he had done the right thing. But now, he just looked tired, regretful, human. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. He nodded. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing a good job with them. My throat tightened. I wasn't sure I believed that most days, but hearing it from him meant something. I sipped my coffee. I'm just trying not to make the same mistakes. He let out a small, sad chuckle. Yeah, I get that. We didn't solve everything that day. There were still years of distance between us, wounds that wouldn't heal overnight, but it was a start. After lunch, I drove home, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. When I walked through the front door, my daughter came running up to me, her little arms wrapping around my leg. "Daddy," she chirped, "we made a fort. Come see." I let her tug me into the living room, where Owen had draped every blanket we owned over the couches, creating a lopsided but impressive structure. "Whoa," I said, crouching down. "This is amazing. Did Mommy teach you how to build forts like this?" Owen beamed. "Yeah, she always said the best forts have snacks inside." I grinned. "Then we better get some snacks." As I sat there with them, eating crackers in the middle of a crooked blanket fort, I thought about Laura, about how she would have laughed at the mess we were making, about how she had left pieces of herself in them, in their joy, in the way they loved so fiercely. And I realized something. She wasn't getting farther away. She was right here, in all the ways that mattered. And as long as I kept her memory alive, my kids would never have to wonder if it was okay to hold on to her. Because it always would be.